Stephen, to you and to Paul McClintock, thank you very much for the warm invitation to be here. CEDA is a wonderful organisation driving ideas and debate, and I think this very full and diverse agenda that you've had over the period in this Parliament, in Parliament House today, is testament to that. And I see a lot of friends around the place, and Dr. Watton, lovely to see you again, and Gillian Broadbent and many others. As you know, I've been put in a hot seat with a major machinery of government change by the Prime Minister to bring energy and the environment together, and specifically energy and climate change. Previously, energy had been in the portfolio, actually I had for the months before with resources and Northern Australia, and environment had been very ably led for a decade in opposition and in government by Greg Hunt. And he had done a lot of that heavy lifting to put in place, for example, the Renewable Energy Target, our Emissions Reduction Fund, and the work that he did in getting us to Paris. But events of recent days have been, very significant for the Australian economy, for the Australian community, and I'm talking specifically about what happened in South Australia. And I'd be very happy to elaborate in the discussion today. I have some prepared remarks, but I think that meeting was significant because the whole issue of energy is one where there are shared responsibilities by state, federal and territory governments, and even the architecture, if you're talking about the Australian Energy Market Operator, if you're talking about the Australian Energy Market Commission, the operator does the dispatchable energy every day into the market and is responsible for the stability of supply. The Energy Market Commission is the rule-setting body. Both of those are national bodies, not Commonwealth bodies. That's an important distinction. There's shared responsibilities with the states, and the federal government, and in the case of AEMO, you've also got industry, which is a 40% stakeholder in the company. So I can't just command at COAG a particular result and hope that it happens. I very much have to, I won't use the word coerce or cajole, I very much have to work consultatively with my colleagues at COAG, and there are different jurisdictions and there are different political leanings, and we all have to put that aside and find common ground. And after what happened in South Australia, it is a particularly important time to get action. We had met as a COAG just a few months ago, 2 months ago, and we had agreed certain reforms in the domestic gas market, which are very significant, but the whole energy security issue had become more into focus as a result of what happened in South Australia. And the other comment I just make as a preamble is the coalition is, and I have to keep reinforcing this because people will try to manipulate the language and twist the message. But the coalition is absolutely committed to emissions reduction, to more renewable energy as a proportion of the overall energy mix, as well as a reliable and an affordable energy system. And I wrote this in the Australian today, Stephen, but on the centre-right of politics, whether it was Margaret Thatcher in the late 80s and 1990, who was talking openly about the challenge of climate change and the need for dramatic action, whether it was John Howard who introduced the first renewable energy target in 2000, 2001, or whether it was the Turnbull government who got agreement at Paris to the 26 to 28% target, which on a per capita basis is among the highest, if not the second highest, in the G20, at about 52%. We are absolutely committed, and we have a suite of policies. And those policies include, Gillian's Clean Energy Finance Corporation. They include ARENA, which has just been given, or kept the $800 million as for grant money. It includes the Emissions Reduction Fund, which has been $2.5 billion worth of government expenditure on finding the lowest cost of abatement through a market-based mechanism. And at $12.10 a tonne of to mitigate emissions at $12.10 a tonne, it's significantly lower than other methods that have been used. the National Electricity Productivity Plan is absolutely critical. This is trying to boost efficiency in electricity usage by 40% by 2030. And we're doing that with new standards for white goods. We're doing this with new standards for buildings. We're doing this with new vehicle emissions standards. So, for example, if you built a building in Australia in 2007 and you were using 30% more electricity than if you built the same building after 2010. If you sold in Australia a state-of-the-art efficient air conditioner in 2003, you wouldn't meet the minimum efficiency standards required of an air conditioner to be sold in Australia today. And if you look around the world, finding efficiencies in energy usage is an absolute critical pathway. And of course, then we've got the renewable energy target, and ours is 33,000 gigawatt hours by 2020, which is 23.5%. Currently, we're around 15%. That actually extends out to 2030, but it's a 33,000 gigawatt hours from 2020 each year onto 2030. So it's not a higher target than that, as others would like us to have, but at 15% currently today, it's going to be still quite a stretch to get there by 2020. But there's an enormous amount of innovation that we're seeing in the sector, which is very, very exciting, particularly about battery storage. So today, I just want to highlight the wake-up call that the recent events in South Australia have provided, outline the COAG Energy Council's plan to deal with these problems, elaborate on Alan Finkel's task in developing an energy security blueprint, and wrap up with the path forward, which must be governments making sure energy security is our collective priority while the sector transition to a lower emissions future. South Australia has experienced two significant events in the last 3 months, the price spikes in July and the blackout on the 28th of September. These events have provided a wake-up call. All governments need to work together to maintain and prioritise energy security. The total loss of South Australia's electricity supply was a seismic event. People were stuck in elevators, there was gridlock on the roads, and people weren't able to leave their own homes. And of course, there was a major cost to business and to industry. This is unacceptable in modern Australia, and there certainly is a better way. And that is what I put to the COAG Energy Council, which I chair, last Friday. We called an extraordinary meeting, and I'm very pleased to say that all the energy ministers from the states in the national electricity market attended, as did Minister Nahan from Western Australia. We had an extremely constructive and productive discussion over the course of the day. We were briefed by the Australian Energy Market Operator on their preliminary findings on the South Australian blackout. Based on the best available information, the event started when extreme weather caused the loss of the 3 major transmission lines, which then disconnected 315 megawatts of wind generation from the north of Adelaide. The removal of this generation resulted in the Hayward interconnector overloading, which tripped to actually protect the asset. This automatic protection took place in less than half a second, and it resulted in the remaining customer load and electricity generation in South Australia being lost, which is commonly referred to as System Black. We were also briefed about the standards that apply to physical infrastructure, such as transmission lines and towers, in the context of maintaining the reliability of the transmission network. We heard from the experts on the developments in battery technology, as well as a number of other issues, including the frequency, control and ancillary services that are needed in the face of higher intermittent generation. While battery storage could be the swing factor in dealing with intermittent generation, some of these developments are still some way away. Bloomberg New Energy Finance estimates that the payback period for a household investing in a battery system is around 19 years, but this is expected to fall below 10 years by 2020. Unlike hydro, gas and coal, intermittent generation does not provide a consistent quality of power. Wind and solar are not synchronous, and unlike hydro, gas and coal, are currently limited in their ability to resist rapid changes in frequency or respond to sudden large changes in electricity supply or consumption. Generators like hydro and coal help maintain system security by ensuring that the frequency of the system is maintained at the necessary 50 Hz, while also producing sufficient inertia, which is necessary for enabling the system to cope with sudden shocks. We were also briefed about the role of the interconnectors and how they can improve linkages among the national electricity market. The national electricity market currently has 6 interconnectors, all of which are privately owned. 5 are currently receiving a regulated return, and only Basslink receives a market return. This raises the obvious question of who pays. We discussed the implications at the meeting as well of state-based renewable targets, and while there remain clear differences between the Commonwealth and some of the states, we did agree on the overall vital importance of energy security. And in relation to state-based targets, it ranges from New South Wales, who's working in concert with the federal renewable energy target with their 2020 target of 20%, to the more radical or aggressive targets, let's say by Queensland, which aim to have a 50% renewable energy uptake by 2030 when they currently only have about 4.5%, or Victoria, which is aiming to have 40% by 2025 when they currently only have about 12%. The real breakthrough at the meeting, though, came when there was an agreement for an independent review to create and develop a blueprint for energy security, which will be led by Australia's Chief Scientist, Alan Finkel. He will build on the extensive work that's already underway by Australia's Energy Market Operator, by Australia's Energy Market Commission, by the AER and other organisations. Analysis by the AEMO and the AEMC into the impact of carbon mitigation policies at both the federal and state level on energy targets will be fed into this review. There will also be detailed analysis and reports by AEMO and the AEMC into future system security and market frameworks. There's been a review of governance arrangements under Mike Vertican, which will feed in. There are national gas market reforms which relate to the security across the national electricity market and its reliability and affordability. And we'll also be looking, in the context of this review, about the importance and the regulatory arrangements about future interconnector investment. The aim is to prepare a blueprint for Australia to not only meet its climate change goals, but also to ensure energy security as well as the sustainability and the affordability of the system going forward. The Chief Scientist will be supported by 2 other individuals who COAG will agree on in the coming weeks. And one of the criteria for those officials is to have, or those people, is to have some experience with the energy market to support Alan Finkel. The report will provide a preliminary or interim report to energy ministers ahead of the COAG leaders meeting in December, and then a final report from Dr. Finkel early in the new year. Finally, on the path forward, we are transitioning to a lower emissions future, and this is a good thing. But the means and the method for getting there are going to be vitally important. We must place a premium on the reliability and the affordability of electricity as we transition unapologetically to a lower emissions future. Energy policy is one of those shared responsibilities, as I indicated earlier, between the Commonwealth, between the states and between the territories, and we must find more common ground. I was very encouraged by the outcomes of the meeting last Friday. I know Tom Koutsantonis has spoken to you today. I spoke with him by phone earlier this morning. He was very constructive at the meeting, and I think all states and the Commonwealth agreeing that energy security is their primary responsibility will ensure that we don't see, hopefully, a repeat of what happened in South Australia, either in that state or anywhere else across the national electricity market. Thank you very much.